You think your life is hard? Try waking up 40,000 years ago. No alarm clock, no coffee, no phone to check, no job to commute to. Just you, a rock shelter, and the very real possibility that a cave lion is waiting outside. For hundreds of thousands of years, this was normal human life, not the exception, the rule. But here's what nobody tells you about prehistoric humans. They probably worked less than you do. That sounds insane, right? We're supposed to be the pinnacle of human achievement. We have technology, medicine, agriculture, civilization. Our ancestors were just cavemen, right? Barely surviving, constantly fighting for their lives, living short, brutal existences of pure suffering. Except that's almost completely wrong. The archaeological evidence reveals something shocking. Early humans had more leisure time than most modern people. They worked about 4 to 6 hours a day on actual survival tasks. The rest? Socializing, playing games, making art, telling stories, just existing. Meanwhile, you were working 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day, commuting, answering emails at midnight, thinking about work on weekends. So what happened? When did we trade freedom for productivity? And more importantly, what were our ancestors actually doing with all that time? This is the story of a single day, 40,000 years ago. Not a special day, not a dramatic hunt or a life or death struggle, just a regular Tuesday in the Paleolithic. We're going to follow one human through their entire day, from the moment dawn breaks to the moment they fall asleep under the stars. And what you're about to discover will completely change how you think about human history, about work, about what it means to live a good life. Because these weren't primitive savages stumbling through existence. They were us. Same brain, same emotions, same capacity for joy, fear, love, and boredom. They just lived in a world so different from ours that it's almost unimaginable. A world without cities, without farms, without writing or money or kings. A world where your survival depended entirely on what you knew, who you knew, and whether you could convince 30 people to care if you lived or died. So let's step back in time. Let's walk through a day in the life of someone who lived 40,000 years ago. Let's find out what humans actually did all day before civilization, before agriculture, before everything we think makes life worth living. The answer might surprise you. It's morning, but you don't know what time. There are no clocks, no schedules, no concept of being late. Light is slowly filtering into the rock shelter where your band has been sleeping. Not bright sunlight yet, just that gray, pre-dawn glow that tells your body it's time to start thinking about waking up. You're not alone. You're never alone. You're surrounded by bodies. Your mother, your siblings, your cousins, your children. 20, maybe 30 people, all pressed together for warmth. Because body heat is a resource you can't afford to waste. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's autumn, and the nights are getting colder. You're lying on a bed of dried grasses and animal furs, but it's not exactly comfortable. The ground is hard. Your hip aches from lying on one side all night, but you're warm enough, sandwiched between other people. The second thing you notice is the smell. Wood smoke, always wood smoke. The fire at the entrance of the shelter has burned low, but it never goes out completely. Someone's job is to keep it alive through the night. Mixed with smoke is the smell of people. Unwashed bodies, but not unpleasant, just human. The scent of animal fat from last night's meal, the earthy smell of the rock itself. Someone is already awake. There's always someone awake. Your people don't sleep the way modern humans do. Research suggests prehistoric humans practiced what scientists call segmented sleep. You'd sleep for a few hours after dark, wake up for an hour or two in the middle of the night, then sleep again until dawn. During those wakeful hours, people would talk quietly, tend the fire, check on children, or just lie there thinking. This meant someone was almost always awake, listening for the sounds that didn't belong. The crack of a twig outside, the low growl of a predator, the footsteps of another human band moving through the territory. Safety wasn't automatic. It was something you maintained, hour by hour, through constant vigilance. Right now, an older woman is feeding the fire. You can hear the soft sounds of wood being added, see the sudden brightening as flames catch. Fire management is maybe the most important skill your people have. Let it die completely and you'd have to restart it from scratch, either by carrying embers from another group's fire, possibly days away, or by using friction methods that could take hours. Better to just keep it alive. As the fire builds, more people start to stir. Children first, always the children. They wake up ready to move, ready to play. You hear a small voice, the rustling of furs, a mother's quiet voice telling her child to stay close, stay warm. But children are terrible at staying still. Within minutes, a few of the older kids are up, moving toward the fire, their breath visible in the cold air. The adults wake more slowly, because here's the thing, there's no rush. This is crucial to understand. The entire concept of hurrying doesn't really exist. Your day is governed by light, by weather, by the seasons. The sun is just starting to rise. There are hours before you need to be doing anything productive. Right now, the most important thing is transitioning from sleep to wakefulness without wasting precious energy. So people stretch, slowly, methodically, working out the stiffness from sleeping on the ground. They yawn, they scratch, they attend to basic needs. Someone steps outside the shelter to relieve themselves, not far, just far enough for privacy and hygiene. Another person checks the surroundings, not paranoid, just careful. What changed during the night? Are there fresh tracks near camp? Is the weather doing? Is that cloud formation promising rain? This morning assessment is critical. Paleolithic humans were readers of signs in ways we can barely comprehend. They could tell from bird behavior if a predator was nearby. They could predict weather days in advance. They could identify individual animals by their tracks and tell you how long ago they passed. All this information gets shared as more people wake up. Dreams are discussed. In the Paleolithic mind, dreams weren't clearly separated from waking reality. A vivid dream might be interpreted as a message, a warning, a visit from spirits. Plans begin to form, but loosely. Someone noticed yesterday that berry bushes were nearly ripe. Someone else saw signs of deer in a particular valley. A third person suggests checking the fishing spots. None of these are commands. Nobody is in charge the way we think of leadership. Decisions emerge from discussion, from consensus, from people choosing to follow those with relevant expertise. Children are playing now, running, chasing, wrestling, the kind of physical play that builds strength and coordination. Adults watch with half their attention, ready to intervene if things get dangerous, but mostly letting kids be kids. Meanwhile, practical work is happening. Someone is checking yesterday's tools. Is that spear point still secure? Does that basket need repairing? Is there enough cordage, or does someone need to make more? These aren't chores in the modern sense. They're just part of life, as natural as breathing. And all of this is happening without any sense of time pressure. The sun is higher now. You've been awake maybe an hour. Your stomach is starting to remind you it's empty. Soon, attention will turn to food, but not yet. For now, you're warm, you're safe, you're surrounded by people who know you, who care about your survival because your survival increases their own chances. This is morning in the Paleolithic. No alarm clocks, no rushing to get ready, no traffic to fight. Just the slow, communal transition from sleep to wakefulness, guided by sunlight and the ancient rhythms that governed human life for hundreds of thousands of years. Let's talk about breakfast. Except your ancestors didn't have breakfast, not the way you think about it. They didn't wake up at 7 a.m. and sit down to eggs and toast. They didn't have meal times at all. They ate when food was available, when hunger demanded it, when the opportunity presented itself. This might sound chaotic, but it wasn't. It was perfectly adapted to their reality. You're hungry now, so you eat. Simple as that. What you're eating depends entirely on what's available. Maybe there's leftover meat from 2 days ago when hunters brought down a deer. It's been hanging in the cool back of the shelter, wrapped in the deer's own hide. The autumn air has kept it from spoiling, though it's starting to smell a bit strong. That means you should probably finish it today. You pull off a strip and chew slowly. It's tough, requires real jaw work, but it's protein and fat, exactly what your body needs. Beside the meat, there's a wooden bowl filled with hazelnuts. Gathered 3 days ago, still good. You crack a few between your back molars. The technique passed down through generations. Children watch adults do this from infancy, learning the exact angle and pressure needed. Next to the nuts is a leather pouch with dried berries, blackberries from late summer, dried in the sun. They're wrinkled now, but sweet and full of quick energy. But the real treasure is the basket of roots near the fire. An older woman dug these up yesterday from the riverbank. Cattail roots, starchy and nutritious, but basically inedible raw. So they've been placed near the fire all night. Not in it, just close enough that heat is slowly breaking down tough fibers and converting starches into sugars. This is cooking, but not like you know it. No recipes, no timers, no thermometers. Just knowledge accumulated over thousands of generations about what heat does to food. By morning, the roots are soft enough to eat, sweet enough to enjoy. You pull one out, peel away the outer layer, and bite into the flesh. It's not gourmet, but it's filling, and more importantly, it's safe. Raw, these roots contain toxins that would make you violently ill. Cooked, they're perfectly edible. This transformation, turning inedible plants into food through fire, might be one of the most important breakthroughs in human history. It effectively doubled or tripled the number of plant species your ancestors could eat. The evidence for this comes from fossilized feces found at archaeological sites. When scientists analyze them under microscopes, they find an astonishing variety. Seeds from dozens of different plant species, pollen from flowers, microscopic fragments of leaves, roots, bark. Some samples show evidence of insects, grasshoppers, beetle larvae, termites. These might sound disgusting to modern Western palates, but they're excellent sources of protein. Many hunter-gatherer societies today consider insects delicacies. Your ancestors weren't specialized eaters, they were opportunists. Coastal groups ate fish, shellfish, seaweed, seabirds. Inland forest dwellers ate deer, wild boar, nuts, berries, mushrooms. River groups ate fish, waterfowl, aquatic plants. This flexibility was crucial for survival. Environments change, seasons shift, animal migrations are unpredictable. A group that could only eat 1 or 2 things would starve when those resources disappeared. But a group that could eat 50 different things? They'd always find something. As you're eating, others are doing the same. A young mother is sharing nuts with her toddler, showing him how to crack them. He's not very good yet, but he's learning. An old woman is making something more complex. She's pounding leftover meat between stones, mixing it with fat and dried berries. She's making pemmican, though she doesn't call it that. It's just food that lasts. Concentrated nutrition that can be carried on journeys or stored for hard times. This is specialist knowledge. The ratio has to be right or it spoils. The technique has to be precise or it doesn't work. She learned this from her mother, who learned it from hers. A chain of knowledge stretching back thousands of generations. Nobody's eating alone. That almost never happens. Food is social, shared, distributed according to complex rules everyone understands. The hunter who made yesterday's kill isn't eating more than anyone else. In fact, he might be eating less, because that's how the system works. Kill an animal, share it with the group. When someone else makes a kill, they'll share with you. This is insurance. Risk pooling, the social glue that keeps the band together. Children run around stealing bites from different adults. Sometimes they're shooed away. Sometimes food is pressed into their hands. Nobody's stingy with children. There's always enough to go around. And if there isn't, adults eat less to make sure the young ones are fed. The meal isn't formal. People eat standing, sitting, walking around, checking tools, talking, laughing. But it serves crucial social functions. Everyone's together, reinforcing bonds, sharing information, making plans. Who's gathering plants today? Who's hunting? Who's staying back to work on that hide? These decisions happen organically, emerging from conversation rather than command. Food preparation continues throughout. Hands are always busy. Someone's grinding seeds. Someone's sorting dried herbs. A teenager is learning to slice meat for drying. These skills are learned entirely through observation. No written instructions, no formal teaching. Children watch adults, try to imitate, get corrected, try again. By the time they're adults, they know hundreds of edible plants. Here's what nobody tells you about prehistoric life. The hunt gets all the glory. The dramatic confrontations with mammoths, the coordinated takedowns of deer, the dangerous encounters with predators. That's what ends up in museums and documentaries. But here's the truth. Hunting was the exception. Gathering was the rule. On any given day, 60 to 80% of your calories came from plants. Roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, berries, leaves, flowers. The percentage varied by season and location, but for most human populations, most of the time, plants kept you alive. This wasn't because your ancestors particularly loved vegetables. It was simple evolutionary math. A successful hunt might feed your band for days, but hunts failed more often than they succeeded. Animals are fast, unpredictable, dangerous. They require hours of tracking, careful coordination, and considerable luck. Plants, meanwhile, stay put. They're exactly where you left them last season, growing in predictable patterns that anyone with enough knowledge could learn to read. So while hunters were out hoping for glory, the majority of your band was doing the real work of survival, walking the landscape with practiced eyes, reading signs invisible to outsiders, collecting the foods that would actually end up in tonight's meal. Now, we need to be careful about assumptions here. For decades, anthropologists told a simple story. Men hunted, women gathered. It was presented as natural, inevitable, maybe even biologically determined. But the evidence tells a more complicated story. Yes, in many societies, women and older children did most gathering while men specialized in hunting. But not all societies, not always. Archaeological evidence shows women buried with hunting weapons. Isotope analysis reveals some women ate meat-heavy diets like male hunters. Some groups practiced communal hunting where everyone participated. Others had specialized gatherers of both sexes. The truth is probably this. Prehistoric societies were pragmatic. They organized labor in ways that made sense for their circumstances. In some groups, pregnant or nursing women focused on gathering because it was compatible with carrying infants. In others, post-reproductive women became the most valuable hunters precisely because they could hunt without childbearing constraints. The key point? Don't imagine gathering as less important than hunting. It was specialist knowledge, it required years of training, and it kept everyone alive. So picture yourself on a gathering expedition. It's mid-morning, the sun's been up a few hours. You're heading out with 3 others. Your aunt, who knows plant locations better than anyone, a younger cousin learning the knowledge, and your own child strapped to your back in a deer hide sling. You're not wandering randomly. You're following a mental map built over years of observation. The oak grove 3 miles north should have acorns ready now. The patch of wild onions near the creek is past prime, but there's a cattail stand just beyond it. If you're lucky, maybe you'll find a beehive with honey. If you're really lucky, bird eggs. The walk itself is no casual stroll. You're covering 5 to 10 miles today over terrain that would challenge modern hikers. Rocky hillsides, thick underbrush, streams to ford. You're doing this while carrying a child plus your tools. A fire-hardened digging stick, several woven baskets, a leather bag, maybe a stone knife. But what makes gathering different from hunting is this. It's not about adrenaline or drama. It's about attention. You're reading the landscape like a book, noticing details invisible to outsiders. The slight soil discoloration indicating tubers below, animal tracks suggesting a fruit tree nearby, the specific angle of sunlight revealing which hillside has ripe berries. Your aunt stops at what looks like unremarkable ground, but she sees something you're still learning to recognize. A particular grass that always grows near edible roots. She drives her digging stick in, probing carefully. 3 inches down, she strikes something solid.
She works around it, loosening soil, then pulls up a tuber the size of your fist. Pale, knobby, completely unappetizing to look at, but you know from experience that roasted in tonight's coals, it'll be sweet and filling. She hands it to you. You place it in your basket. She digs again. Another tuber. And another. In 10 minutes, you've collected enough to feed everyone tonight. But you're not done. Your aunt knows these plants intimately. More importantly, she knows their stories. Stories are how you remember knowledge. She tells your cousin about the time her grandmother got sick from eating a root that looked almost identical to this one, but had slightly different leaves. She points out the distinction. 3 veins instead of 5. That tiny difference means the other plant would kill you. This is education, but nothing like sitting in a classroom. It's survival knowledge passed through stories, demonstrated with actual plants, reinforced through years of observation. Your cousin will learn hundreds of these lessons. By the time she's your age, she'll know 300 plant species by sight, by season, by location. She'll know which are edible, which are medicinal, which are deadly, when to harvest each one, how to prepare it, what it's useful for. Modern botanists spend years in university learning plant identification. Your ancestors learned it by necessity, starting in childhood, because getting it wrong meant death.
Here's something that might surprise you. Your ancestor probably isn't hunting today, or yesterday, maybe not even this week. We have this image of prehistoric life as constant struggle. Early humans waking up each morning and immediately chasing mammoths. Hollywood loves this narrative. Man versus beast, daily death matches. But the reality was far more strategic. Hunting wasn't a daily grind. It was an occasional, high-stakes event that required immense planning, patience, and, more often than not, ended in failure. A successful hunt might happen every few days if you were lucky, every few weeks if you weren't. The rest of the time you were preparing, planning, tracking, and relying on gathering to fill your stomach. But when the hunt did happen, it was extraordinary. Let's say today is one of those days. The signs have been building for a while. Yesterday, scouts spotted fresh tracks from a small herd of red deer moving through a valley about 5 miles from camp. The animals are heading toward a seasonal water source, following patterns your people have observed for generations. The timing is right, the weather is clear, and most crucially, several experienced hunters are available and healthy. This is how it begins, not with sudden impulse, but with careful deliberation. The group gathers in early morning, 6 men and 2 women, all proven trackers and hunters. They discuss the plan using spoken language and hand signals refined over thousands of years. Who takes which position, where the animals are likely to go, what the fallback options are if things go wrong. They carry spears, each one a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering that took days to create. The wooden shaft carefully straightened over fire and seasoned for months. The stone point, knapped from high-quality flint traded from a quarry 200 miles away. Hafted with plant resin and sinew that's been processed to create a bond stronger than most modern adhesives. Some hunters also carry atlatls, spear throwers that use leverage to triple the velocity and distance of a thrown spear. This technology is relatively new, maybe only a few thousand years old in your region, but it's revolutionizing hunting the same way the bow will thousands of years from now. The group moves out. Immediately, you notice something. They're not rushing. There's no frantic chase, no dramatic sprint across the savannah. Instead, they're walking at a steady, sustainable pace, reading the landscape as they go. This is where hunting becomes science. One tracker kneels beside a depression in sandy soil. He studies it for several moments, then signals to the others. The track is fresh, probably from this morning. The depth and clarity tell him the animal was walking, not alarmed. The spacing between tracks indicates a young adult, healthy, good size but not too large to bring down. He can tell all this from a single hoof print. This isn't magic, it's pattern recognition honed over a lifetime.
Your people have been tracking animals since childhood, learning to read the landscape the way you read text. Every broken twig, every disturbed pebble, every scratch on rock, all part of the story. Where the animals went, how fast they were moving, how long ago they passed, whether they were calm or alarmed. The group follows the trail for hours. No rushing, just steady walking, periodically stopping to check signs and adjust strategy. This is the part of hunting that never makes it into dramatic retellings, the long, patient stalking that requires more mental endurance than physical strength. Around midday, they spot the herd. 8 deer grazing in a shallow valley near a waterhole. Now comes the critical decision. Do they attempt an ambush, trying to get close enough for spear range, or do they use the technique that humans, uniquely among all predators, have perfected? They choose persistence hunting. Here's what makes humans terrifying predators. We can't outrun almost any animal in a sprint. A healthy deer can hit 40 miles per hour. A human tops out around 15. But we have something no other animal has. We can run for hours in the heat of the day without overheating. Thanks to our nearly hairless bodies and incredible capacity for sweating, most animals, covered in fur and lacking efficient cooling systems, have to stop and rest after intense exertion, or they'll literally cook from the inside. The hunters spread out and begin to jog toward the herd. Not a sprint, just a steady, sustainable trot. The deer spot them immediately and bolt. They're gone in seconds, disappearing over a ridge. But the humans don't stop. They follow the tracks at that same steady pace, reading the signs, keeping up the pressure.
By midday, camp is alive with a sound that would be instantly recognizable to any craftsperson throughout history. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythmic sound of stone on stone. Not loud, not violent, just persistent, purposeful. The sound of someone making something that didn't exist before. Your aunt is sitting on a flat rock near the fire, a hammerstone in one hand, a piece of flint in the other. Every few seconds, she strikes the flint at precisely the right angle. A small flake spins off into the dust. Around her, a scatter of rejected pieces and failed attempts, archaeological debris that will still be visible 40,000 years later. This isn't occasional work. This is daily maintenance, as essential as eating or sleeping. Because tools don't last forever. That spear point you used yesterday? It might have chipped when it hit bone. The scraper someone used to process hide last week? Its edge is dull now, almost useless. In a world without metal, without mass production, without the ability to just buy replacements, you make your tools, or you don't survive. But here's what's remarkable. Stone tool making, what archaeologists call knapping, wasn't something you figured out one afternoon. It was a skill that took years to master, requiring an understanding of stone properties that bordered on intimate knowledge. Different rocks fractured in different ways. Flint was predictable. Obsidian was sharp but fragile. Chert was reliable but harder to work. You had to know where to find good stone, how to test it, how to recognize quality before investing hours of work. Watch your aunt working, and you'd see expertise that took a lifetime to acquire. She's not just hitting rocks together randomly. She's reading the stone, seeing lines of potential fracture invisible to untrained eyes. Each strike is calculated. Too hard, and the piece shatters. Too soft, and nothing happens. The angle has to be exact, the point of impact precisely chosen. It's geometry and physics executed entirely through intuition and muscle memory. The process is called the prepared core technique, and it represents centuries of accumulated knowledge. Your aunt has shaped this piece of flint over the past hour, carefully removing flakes to create a core with just the right shape and angle. Now she's ready for the payoff. One perfect strike and a long, thin blade detaches from the core, sharp enough to slice through hide or meat with minimal pressure. She examines it critically, running her thumb along the edge, then nods. Good enough. But she's not done. The blade needs hafting, attachment to a handle that makes it actually useful. This is where craft becomes art. She's prepared a wooden handle earlier, a piece of hardwood with a slot carved into one end. Now she pulls out a small leather pouch containing pine resin she'd collected and heated until it became sticky, mixed with charcoal and crushed bone for strength. This is prehistoric superglue. Watching her work, you'd notice something fascinating. She doesn't need to think about most steps. Her hands move automatically through processes she's performed thousands of times. Heat the resin, apply it to the handle slot, position the blade precisely, wrap the joint with thin strips of sinew that will shrink and tighten as they dry. The entire process takes maybe 10 minutes, but it draws on decades of experience and generations of accumulated knowledge. Near her, your brother is working on something different. He has a piece of antler from the deer killed 3 days ago. He's slowly, patiently carving it into a spear point. This is different from stonework. Antler is organic, flexible, capable of impacts that would shatter stone. But it's harder to shape, requiring different tools and techniques. He's using a stone burin, a chisel-like tool to scrape and carve the antler. The work is tedious, a constant soft scraping sound, thin curls of antler falling away with each stroke. Every so often he stops and tests the point against his thumb, checking for sharpness and balance. This point will be different from stone-tipped spears, lighter, more flexible. It can be thrown farther and is less likely to break on impact. But it takes hours to make, and antler is only available when someone successfully hunts deer. Stone is everywhere. Antler is precious. So you use it carefully for special purposes, and you make sure everyone knows who made what. Because here's something the archaeological record has only recently revealed. Prehistoric craftspeople took pride in their work. We know this because we find tools that are more beautiful than they needed to be. Stone points shaped with perfect symmetry, even though asymmetrical points work just as well. Bone needles decorated with tiny carved patterns. Antler spear throwers carved into the shapes of animals. Nobody decorates something purely functional unless they care about aesthetics, unless they want their work to be recognizable, admired. Your brother's spear point will be efficient, yes, but it will also be beautiful. Because when you carry it, when you use it to feed your family, you want everyone to know who made it. Status, reputation, identity, all conveyed through craftsmanship. Across camp, 3 women are working on equally essential tasks: clothing production. One is scraping a deer hide stretched across a wooden frame, using a stone scraper to remove every trace of fat and membrane from the inner surface. The sound is distinctive, a rhythmic scraping that carries across camp. Her hands move in steady strokes, overlapping each path slightly to ensure complete coverage. This isn't quick work. A single hide might require hours of scraping, and even then you're not done. The hide has to be treated, either by smoking it over fire or by rubbing it with a mixture of brain tissue and fat that prevents it from becoming stiff when it dries. Brain tanning is chemistry without labs, developed through centuries of trial and error. Someone, somehow, figured out that brains contained exactly the right compounds to preserve leather. Maybe by accident, maybe through systematic experimentation. Either way, the knowledge has been passed down, parent to child, for generations. Nearby, her sister is working on something different. She has a piece of antler from the deer killed 3 days ago. She's slowly, patiently carving it into a spear point. This is different from stonework. Antler is organic, flexible, capable of impacts that would shatter stone. But it's harder to shape, requiring different tools and techniques. He's using a stone burin, a chisel-like tool to scrape and carve the antler. The work is tedious, a constant soft scraping sound, thin curls of antler falling away with each stroke. Every so often he stops and tests the point against his thumb, checking for sharpness and balance. This point will be different from stone-tipped spears, lighter, more flexible. It can be thrown farther and is less likely to break on impact. But it takes hours to make, and antler is only available when someone successfully hunts deer. Stone is everywhere. Antler is precious. So you use it carefully for special purposes, and you make sure everyone knows who made what. Because here's something the archaeological record has only recently revealed. Prehistoric craftspeople took pride in their work.
We know this because we find tools that are more beautiful than they needed to be. Stone points shaped with perfect symmetry, even though asymmetrical points work just as well. Bone needles decorated with tiny carved patterns. Antler spear throwers carved into the shapes of animals. Nobody decorates something purely functional unless they care about aesthetics, unless they want their work to be recognizable, admired. Your brother's spear point will be efficient, yes, but it will also be beautiful. Because when you carry it, when you use it to feed your family, you want everyone to know who made it. Status, reputation, identity, all conveyed through craftsmanship.
If you imagine early humans as exhausted, half-starved figures trudging endlessly across the landscape, constantly hunting, constantly gathering, constantly on the brink of collapse, you're not alone. That image has been drilled into us for decades. Life before civilization, we are told, was nasty, brutish, and short. A constant struggle, no time for anything except work. But when anthropologists started living with modern hunter-gatherer societies and actually counting how they spent their time, a very different picture emerged. On average, adults in foraging societies spend about 4 to 6 hours a day on what we'd call work. Finding food, preparing it, maintaining tools, basic camp upkeep. The rest of the day isn't filled with frantic scrambling. It's filled with nothing in particular. Resting, talking, playing, making music, grooming, staring into the distance, simply existing. If your day 40,000 years ago were plotted on a modern timesheet, it would confuse a corporate manager. Yes, there are bursts of intense effort, tracking animals for hours, carrying heavy loads, shaping stone with careful precision. But these bursts are surrounded by long stretches of low-intensity, flexible time. Time you can bend around your body's energy, the weather, the mood of the group. So what did people actually do with all those hours? A lot of it would look surprisingly familiar and strangely slow. You rest. That might mean lying on your side under a patch of shade, half listening to the chatter of relatives. It might mean sitting near the fire, absently turning a smooth pebble in your fingers, watching smoke drift upward. When the body is your only real tool, preserving it is part of survival. Resting isn't laziness, it's maintenance. You socialize. Conversation in a small band of 20 to 30 people isn't optional background noise, it's the web that holds the group together. Every talk about who saw which animals, who found new tubers, who argued with whom last night, these aren't just gossip. They're information-sharing systems, conflict management strategies, emotional first aid. You play with children. You let them climb over you like a living jungle gym. You show them how to throw sticks at targets, how to gently handle stone without cutting themselves. Their games might look like chaos, but through them they're rehearsing adulthood, practicing coordination, testing social boundaries, experimenting with risk and trust. For long stretches of the day, there is no urgent agenda, no tight schedule, no alarm clock dragging you from one task to the next. The pace of life is dictated by the slow cycles of the sun, the seasons, the movements of animals, not by the minute hand on a dial. And then, somewhere in all that unscheduled time, something else begins to happen. Humans start to invent fun. Archaeologists have discovered small objects at prehistoric sites that don't fit into any category of tool or weapon. Tiny carved animals made of bone or antler, smooth-shaped pieces of stone drilled through the center, like early spinning tops. Little figurines of people, sometimes exaggerated in strange ways. To a hungry adult, these might not do much, but to a child, they're toys. You can picture it. A small hand trying to spin a stone disc on the packed earth, two kids pretending to hunt with miniature spears made from twigs. A parent, half amused, half attentive, letting them help with a task that doesn't really need helping. Play isn't a distraction from real life. It is real life. Through play, children learn to aim, to negotiate, to share, to lead and follow. There are hints of games for adults, too. Certain small stones and bones found together in patterns that suggest dice or counters. Etched lines on flat rock surfaces that might have been game boards, places where pieces were moved back and forth in quiet competitions. We don't know the rules or the stakes, but the impulse is clear. When immediate needs are met, human minds look for patterns, challenges, little puzzles to solve.
Games are structured daydreams, and early humans seem to have had plenty of time for them. And then there's music. In caves in Europe, archaeologists have discovered delicate flutes carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory, some more than 40,000 years old. They're not crude noisemakers. Some have carefully spaced holes that produce recognizable musical scales. Someone sat down and experimented, adjusting each hole just a bit, learning by ear how to turn raw bone into a working instrument. Imagine the first time someone in your band brings one of those flutes out by the fire. The sky is dark, stars are beginning to appear, embers are glowing. They lift the flute to their lips, take a breath, and a strange, clear sound rises above the crackle of fire and the soft murmur of voices. For a moment, everyone freezes. Then the notes repeat, hesitant at first, then more confident. Someone starts to clap a rhythm. Another person taps a stick against a log. Feet begin to move. Bodies sway. The camp, which just minutes ago was quietly settling in for the night, is suddenly alive with dance. Music and dance are more than entertainment. They synchronize bodies and minds. When everyone moves together, breathes together, voices rise and fall together, something powerful happens in the brain. Group identity strengthens. Anxiety fades. The world feels for a moment coherent and safe. In small, vulnerable bands of early humans, those moments of shared rhythm may have been as important as any spear or shelter. After the dancing comes the other great technology of leisure: stories. You're back at the fire. The night is quiet now. A few last sparks drift upward like tiny glowing insects. The older members of the group edge closer to the flames. Children lean against their parents. Someone, maybe the best talker in the band, begins a story. It might be about the last great hunt when the wind changed suddenly and nearly ruined everything. It might be about the time the river flooded and the group had to move camp in a hurry. It might be about a trickster animal who steals fire, or a spirit who lives in thunderclouds and punishes the greedy. Some stories are clearly about real events, others reach into the world of myth and imagination. But all of them carry something: a warning, a clever strategy, a memory of who did what and why it mattered. Without writing, without records, stories are the memory of the group. They carry information across years and generations: where the good water is in dry season, which plants cure fever and which kill, what happened the last time someone broke a particular social rule. Listening to these tales by firelight, half awake, half drifting, you're not just being entertained, you're being trained, quietly and gently, for the rest of your life. But not all time is spent in conversation, music, and play. Some of it is devoted to the slow, meticulous work of grooming. If you've ever watched primates in a documentary, you've seen it. Monkeys and apes carefully parting each other's fur, picking out dirt and parasites, inspecting skin with absolute concentration. It looks fussy, but it serves two purposes: hygiene and bonding. Early humans did the same thing, with a slightly different twist. No fur, but plenty of hair. You sit with your back to a friend or sibling while they gently comb through your scalp with fingers or a simple bone comb. They pick at little bumps, remove bits of debris, crush an unlucky louse between their nails. It's both practical and soothing. The kind of intimate contact that says without words, "You matter. I'm paying attention to you." Then comes decoration. Red ochre, a naturally occurring iron-rich pigment, shows up at human sites going back hundreds of thousands of years. It's often ground into powder, mixed with fat or water, and applied to skin or hair. Is it sunscreen, insect repellent, symbolic body paint? It might be all three at once. You sit while someone traces lines on your face, your chest, your arms. Maybe they mark you as a member of a particular band. Maybe they signal your role in a ritual, or your status as someone who completed a dangerous hunt. Hair is braided, beards are trimmed or decorated. Simple jewelry made from shells, teeth, or carved bone is threaded through hair or hung from cords around wrists and necks. These acts take time. They're not required to eat, drink, or stay alive, but they're part of how early humans turned bare survival into a life with identity, beauty, and meaning. And in between all this, talking and playing and decorating and music making, there are long stretches of something in the modern world we've almost forgotten how to do. Just watching. You lie on your back and look at clouds drifting across the sky. You sit quietly and follow the path of a line of ants carrying food back to their nest. You stand at the edge of camp and watch a herd of animals grazing in the distance, the way they cluster and scatter, how the wind shifts their scent. You trace the patterns of stars, noticing how some constellations rise at particular times of year, how the moon waxes and wanes. To a modern observer, this might look like boredom, but for early humans, this constant, gentle observing is part of how they build a mental map of the world. It trains attention. It sharpens intuition. The person who has spent hundreds of evenings quietly watching the sky might be the first to notice an unusual cloud pattern hinting at an approaching storm. The child who has spent endless hours following animal tracks just for fun might become the best tracker in the band without ever being formally taught. And there's something else here, something less practical and more mysterious. When you have no glowing screens, no written words, no background music piped in from distant speakers, silence and stillness don't feel empty. They feel full.
By late afternoon, the light is changing. Shadows start to stretch. Colors drain from the landscape. Temperature drops faster than you'd expect. For Paleolithic people, this isn't just a pretty sunset. It's a signal. A quiet alarm clock telling everyone, whatever you still need to do, finish it now. The open landscape that felt manageable in daylight becomes something very different in the dark. Depth perception collapses. Predators that spent a day hiding in shade start to move. So your ancestors begin to contract their world, pulling it inward, drawing activity toward the same thing that has defined evening for humans for at least hundreds of thousands of years: fire. Not everybody had it all the time. There were probably groups that lost fire occasionally or went without during travel. But for many late Paleolithic communities, fire was as central to evening as gravity is to your body right now. It's not just a tool, it's a boundary line. Inside the circle of light and warmth, us. Outside it, everything else. As the sun sinks, people drift back toward camp, toward that flickering center. Gatherers return with armloads of wood, bundles of plants, maybe a few surprise finds, eggs, honey, shellfish. Hunters straggle in later, sometimes triumphant with meat, sometimes empty-handed and silent. Children who spent the day in a swarm of games tightened their radius, pulled in by the same invisible gravity. The noise level shifts. Daytime work is all scraping, chopping, calling across distances. Evening is more contained. You hear the crackle of wood, the soft thud of someone hammering a last flake off a stone tool, the muted murmur of voices as people settle into the glow. Before anyone truly rests, though, there's one more job that matters as much as food: building a place to sleep. Beds sound like luxury, but they're really survival technology. The ground is cold, damp, full of insects, parasites, and heat-sucking stone. Lie straight on it night after night, and your body pays for it. So your ancestors learned to build barriers between themselves and the earth. Archaeologists have found traces of ancient bedding, compressed layers of grasses, leaves, and aromatic plants laid down in thick mats, sometimes renewed over and over in the same spot. Think of it as low-tech mattress. First, someone clears the worst stones and debris. Then they lay down a base of dry material, grass, reeds, leaves, anything that traps air and sheds water. On top, maybe softer plants, maybe moss. Then, if they have them, animal skins, hides from deer, antelope, maybe bigger game, hair side up for insulation, flesh side in for durability. It's not individually owned furniture. Sleeping spots follow a social map. Parents near children, elders placed where they're easiest to assist and protect. People with tense relationships, maybe not right next to each other. Over time, everyone knows where they belong when night comes. These arrangements reveal status, alliances, affections, without anyone having to say a word. And while quiet bed building happens at the edge of camp, something more dramatic is happening at the center, the evening meal. If you imagine early humans constantly chewing all day like grazing animals, the evidence doesn't support that. For many groups, the largest and most reliable meal clustered around nightfall. During the day, people might snack, a handful of berries here, a cracked bone for marrow there, a few nuts or roasted tubers on the go. But the full accounting of the day's success, especially when there was meat, tended to happen in the evening around the fire. Food isn't just eaten, it's transformed. Meat gets roasted or boiled in skin bags or bark containers. Bones split for fat-rich marrow. Organs cooked quickly before they spoil. Plant foods are pounded, peeled, ground, leached of toxins. Someone tosses roots into the ashes, someone else turns skewers of meat. Another person keeps the fire at the right intensity. This isn't random chaos, it's practiced choreography. And the distribution of that food is a social performance. Who gets the first piece? Who gets the best cuts? Does the successful hunter keep most of the meat, or does it get divided according to custom? Elders first, small children next, then everyone else. Different groups probably did this differently, but almost all would have understood one basic truth. You don't survive long in a foraging society if you're selfish at the big meal. So the evening becomes a lesson in generosity and memory. People notice who shares and who hoards, who makes sure the child on the far side of the fire gets a piece of liver or fat, and who pretends not to see. These choices sink deep. In a world with no written laws, these are the behaviors that shape your reputation, determine who will help you when it's your turn to be unlucky. While hands are busy, mouths are too. Fire-lit conversations are where human social life thickens. During the day, communication is often practical, shouted across distance. Over here, watch out, try this way. At night, the volume drops, the content changes. People debrief the day. A hunter quietly explains how the antelope bolted faster than expected. A gatherer laughs about the time they tipped over a whole basket of berries. Someone brings up a minor conflict from earlier, a harsh word, a broken tool, and the group smooths it over while chewing. Because carrying that tension into tomorrow could be dangerous. There's planning, too. When to move camp, who will scout that distant ridge, whether to follow the reindeer herds north or stay near the river a bit longer. These aren't formal councils, but patterns emerge. Some people speak more, others listen and nod, influencing the flow with a single quiet remark. Children absorb all of this, learning not just facts about animals and plants, but how decisions are made, what counts as persuasive, when to speak and when to stay silent. And then, let's zoom back in on that ordinary day, 40,000 years ago. You're not alone out there on the savannah, or in the forest, or along the icy riverbank. You live in a band, not a village, not a city. A tiny human world of maybe 20, 30, 40 people, rarely more than 50. Small enough that you know every voice, every laugh, every step in the dark. You can tell who's walking behind you by the way their foot scrapes the ground. You recognize a cough in the middle of the night. This isn't an accident. It's how your species works. Bands that are too small can't defend themselves, can't share enough skills, can't find enough marriage partners. Bands that are too big become unstable. Too many conflicts, too many mouths to feed. Too hard to move together when the herds leave or seasons change. So natural selection, culture, and sheer practicality have all pushed your ancestors into a kind of sweet spot. A living room-sized society. Intimate, flexible, deeply personal. Everyone in that little group fits into a mental map in your head. Who's generous? Who's lazy? Who can be trusted to keep a secret? Who will share food when the hunt goes badly? Who will quietly slip your child a piece of dried meat when you're not looking? These invisible maps of relationships are as important as stone tools or fire. They're how your people survive. And where there are relationships, there is conflict. Not courtroom drama, Not kings and judges, but everyday frictions. Someone took more meat than they earned. Someone flirted with someone else's partner. Someone skipped their turn watching the fire. In a band this small, you can't just walk away and never see them again. You're going to be sleeping 10 feet from them tonight. So how do you keep the peace without police, laws, or prisons? You use the oldest tools human beings ever invented. Gossip, mediation, reputation. Gossip in your world isn't idle chatter. It's law enforcement, news, and social media rolled into one. When two hunters argue over who wounded the antelope first, people notice. The story gets repeated around the fire that night, retold and reshaped. By the time it's made the rounds, everyone knows who was selfish, who was generous, who apologized, who held a grudge. By 40,000 years ago, your ancestors almost certainly had languages as capable as any spoken today. Different vocabularies, different rhythms, but the same basic cognitive machinery. Syntax, tense, metaphor, jokes, insults, love songs, lullabies. Language lets your band coordinate complex hunts. It lets elders tell children about dangers they've never personally seen. It lets news of a drought in the next valley over reach you before you run out of food. And, at night, lying half asleep near the fire, language lets you drift on waves of quiet storytelling. Tales of heroic animals, clever ancestors, dangerous spirits, lost lovers. In this world, the elderly aren't pushed aside. They're hard drives. In a physically demanding life, an old body can't do everything it once did. Knees ache, eyes blur, hands shake a little when napping stone. But the mind, honed by decades of experience, becomes more valuable with each passing year. The old man who can't chase a deer can still remember which stars mark the change of season. The grandmother who no longer gathers as far from camp remembers which plants cure stomach pain and which ones are deadly. The elder who has lived through a brutal winter can advise when it's time to move, even if the sky and ground look deceptively calm. When a child's fever spikes, the elders recall past fevers and what helped. When smoke on the horizon hints at a distant fire, they remember the last time the forest burned, which animals fled which way, which valley stayed safe. They're walking libraries of famine and abundance, of floods and dry years, of conflicts and reconciliations. In a world without books, losing an elder suddenly is like a modern library catching fire overnight. Which brings us to death. People died young, often. Infection, injury, childbirth, accidents while hunting, or simply falling from a tree. But what's striking in the archaeological record is not just the fact of death, it's how people responded to it. We find graves, not just bodies dropped in holes, but careful arrangements. Skeletons curled in fetal positions, sometimes dusted with red ochre as if painted for a final journey. Individuals buried with tools, beads, pieces of meat, animal teeth, ornaments. In some Neanderthal sites, bodies appear to have been laid to rest in pits that were then filled deliberately, perhaps even with flowers. This suggests something more than disposal. It hints at ritual. Maybe your band believes the dead continue on in another place. Maybe they become animals. Maybe they watch over the living. Maybe there are stories about a shadow world under the ground or above the clouds. Whatever the specific belief, one thing seems clear. Death is not treated as nothing. When someone dies in your camp, the ordinary rhythm breaks. Gathering trips are postponed. Hunts are quieter. People sit closer together at night. Words are spoken more softly. Children ask questions. Adults tell stories about the dead person's bravery, generosity, or foolish mistakes. Death, too, becomes part of the gossip of the group, but in a different register, not about behavior to be judged, but about meaning to be found. The act of burying the dead, of returning them to the earth with care, does something to the living. It knits them together in shared grief, shared memory, shared fear, and shared hope. In that sense, social life and community aren't just pleasant add-ons to early human existence. They are the core technology that made everything else possible. Your ancestors didn't survive because they were the strongest individuals. They survived because they were embedded in networks of care, obligation, communication, and memory. Around that small circle of 20 to 50 faces, faces you know better than your own reflection, the entire human story is already unfolding. Cooperation and conflict, love and jealousy, wisdom and foolishness, birth and loss. A tiny, moving tribe carrying fire, tools, stories, and genes across the landscape. As evening deepens and the fire burns lower, those bonds of community will shape the last hours of your prehistoric day. How you gather around the flames, what you sing, what you remember, and what you dare to dream about for tomorrow. By the time the hunting and gathering of the day are done, when bellies are mostly full and the fire has burned down to a steady orange glow, something else usually begins. Something that doesn't fill the stomach or sharpen a spear, but still feels necessary. Your ancestors have another job besides staying alive. They have to make sense of being alive. Picture the entrance of a cave as night falls. The last light is fading outside. The air cools and the sounds of insects and distant animal calls begin to rise. Inside, the fire paints the walls with moving shadows. Someone picks up a piece of red ochre. Someone else unrolls a length of sinew with shell beads threaded onto it. In the half-darkness, people start to transform themselves and the world around them. To us, it looks like art and religion. To them, it was probably just life. Let's start with the most famous evidence of that inner world. Deep in the dark, far from the cave mouth, far beyond where anyone needed to go to sleep or store food, there are paintings. Not casual doodles near the entrance, not quick sketches you might make while waiting out the rain. Some of the most spectacular images in Ice Age Europe appear hundreds of meters underground in places you can't even reach without crawling or climbing. Places where no sunlight ever reached. Horses, bison, lions, woolly rhinoceroses, mammoths. Herds flowing across the stone as if the rock itself was alive. Carefully chosen curves in the cave wall become the bulging shoulder of a bison, the arch of an animal's ribs, the swell of a horse's chest. Some images are shaded and layered as if the artist wanted them to move in the flickering torchlight. This wasn't interior decoration. Nobody was living down there. To get these paintings, people had to gather torches, fuel, pigments, and tools. They had to organize expeditions into absolute darkness. They had to know the cave well enough not to get lost. They chose these places deliberately, then filled them with images that, as far as we know, only they would ever see. Why? We don't know, but there are clues. One possibility is teaching. Imagine the hunters of your group bringing adolescents into the cave, torches in hand, pointing at painted herds while they tell stories. Where to aim your spear, how a wounded animal behaves, which season the bison pass through which valley. The cave walls become a kind of three-dimensional blackboard, a school hidden under the earth. Another possibility is ritual. In many traditional societies, images of animals aren't just pictures. They're tools to influence reality, to draw a successful hunt into being before it happens, to honor the spirit of the animals you depend on, to apologize even for taking their lives. Those painted bison may have been more like prayers than paintings. Or maybe it was both, teaching wrapped in myth, practical knowledge encoded in sacred stories, a ritual hunt painted in the dark that prepared you for a real hunt in the dawn. And still, the question lingers. Why so deep? Why risk the dangers of underground tunnels when a rock face outside would work just as well? Some archaeologists think those deep chambers were chosen exactly because they cut you off from ordinary life. Once you were down there, there was no day or night, no horizon, no weather. Just stone, darkness, fire, voices, and whatever moved inside your own mind. That's the perfect recipe for altered states of consciousness. Which brings us to something we can't fossilize, but we can infer: early spirituality. Across many hunter-gatherer cultures today, there are figures we would call shamans. People who dance, chant, fast, or use psychoactive plants to enter trance states. They travel to other realms, talk to ancestors, negotiate with animal spirits, heal the sick. If something like that existed tens of thousands of years ago, and the evidence suggests it might have, it would make perfect sense to bring those ceremonies deep underground, into the belly of the earth itself. In the dark caves of Europe, archaeologists have found strange clusters of dots, lines, and geometric signs around the animals. Not just realistic pictures, but abstract marks, ladders, zigzags, hand stencils, series of dots that may line up with lunar cycles. Some researchers think these marks formed an early notational system, a way of counting days, tracking seasons, maybe even predicting migrations. Others think those shapes resemble patterns people see in visions, the geometric flashes of light that appear behind closed eyes during trances. If that's true, then the walls of these caves are not just records of animals, but records of experiences inside the human mind. While all this was happening underground, something else was happening on the surface. When you start decorating your body, you're sending messages without words. Color, pattern, and jewelry tell people who you are and where you belong. Married or single, healer or hunter, member of this group, not that one. Those beads and pendants may have carried stories too. A shell from the coast worn by someone who lived far inland means trade or travel, or a memory of a journey. A tooth from a dangerous animal might be a trophy, a reminder that you faced fear and survived. Red ochre in particular shows up over and over in burials. Bodies dusted with red, graves lined with pigment. Maybe it symbolized blood or life or the setting sun. Maybe it was meant to protect the dead on a journey or to make them visible to spirits. Whatever it meant something. By the time you get to about 35,000 years ago, this symbolic world becomes crowded. Now it's not just beads and paint and animal images. People start carving the human form itself. The Venus figurines. Small, often handheld sculptures carved from bone, ivory, or stone. They share a similar style across huge distances, from France to Siberia. Many have exaggerated breasts, hips, and bellies. Faces are often minimal or absent. Arms and feet may be barely indicated. The focus is bodies that look pregnant, fertile, abundant. What were they? Some think they were fertility charms, held by women as a kind of hope for healthy children. Others suggest they were representations of a mother goddess, an early form of deity that embodied birth, nourishment, and the cycles of life and death. There's even a theory that some were self-portraits, carved by pregnant women looking down at their own bodies, seeing their belly, hips, and breasts, but not their face. We can't be sure, but whatever their purpose, these figures show something crucial. People were thinking about themselves as symbols. Not just, that is a woman, but this small object stands for something bigger. Womanhood, motherhood, life. And that symbolic thinking didn't stop with bodies and animals. It extended to the sky. There are hints, just hints, that some early humans were paying careful attention to the stars. At a few sites, carved bones and stones show series of notches that may match the phases of the moon, or seasonal events like migrations and plant ripenings. Certain animal images in caves appear clustered in ways that some researchers argue line up with star patterns seen at particular times of year. These interpretations are controversial, but it wouldn't be surprising. If your survival depends on remembering when the herds move, when the salmon run, when certain plants are edible, you watch the sky, you notice patterns. Eventually, you might start to think the sky is a kind of giant story written just for you. And if the sky tells stories, then maybe the animals do too. For hunter-gatherer peoples around the world, animals are rarely just meat. They are persons of a different sort. Teachers, tricksters, guardians. The bear that walks on two legs, the raven who steals the sun, the antelope that gave humans fire. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're moral lessons, ecological knowledge, maps of the landscape woven into memory. Your Paleolithic ancestors almost certainly saw the world this way. When they painted a running horse on a cave wall, they may not have been drawing a horse. They may have been invoking a spirit that moves like a horse, thinks like a horse, sees the world from a horse's height. To offend that spirit might mean bad hunting for years. To honor it might bring abundance. The result is a world where everything is alive with meaning. Rocks, rivers, trees, animals, clouds, stars, all beings, all with stories and intentions. And in that world, special people would emerge. The ones who dream vividly, who notice patterns no one else sees, who can calm a panicked child or soothe someone in pain with words and songs. These might become the shamans or whatever your ancestors called them. Imagine a night near the fire. The day's work is done. People sit in a loose circle, some mending nets, others half asleep. The shaman or the storyteller, the singer, the one who goes between, begins. A drum starts. Maybe nothing more than stretched hide over a frame or a hollowed-out log struck with a stick. The beat begins slow, heart-like, then faster. Voices rise, feet start to tap. The group's breathing unconsciously synchronizes. After a while, you're not just listening to the rhythm, you're inside it. Music is one of the oldest human technologies we know. Bone flutes made from the wing bones of birds, hollowed-out reindeer antlers that can be played like wind instruments, simple percussion instruments that would leave no trace in the archaeological record, but are almost certainly as old as language itself. In the flickering firelight, rhythm and melody do something extraordinary. They dissolve the boundaries between individuals. When everyone moves in time, sings the same phrase, claps on the same beat, the group becomes a single organism for a while. Fear contracts, time stretches. People enter shared trance states, mild or deep, without needing drugs, just breath and sound and movement. In those moments, the stories about animal spirits and ancestors and journeys to other realms aren't just tales, they feel real. Because you are experiencing something that is in fact real. A different mode of consciousness, a different way of being a mind in a body surrounded by other minds and bodies doing the same thing. That's the social function of early spirituality. It isn't only about explaining thunderstorms or what happens after you die. It's about welding small, fragile groups of humans into something strong enough to survive. Shared rituals, shared symbols, shared songs. They're the glue that holds the band together when food is scarce and danger is near. And when you put all of this together, the deep cave art, the beads and ochre, the carved figurines, the abstract marks, the music and trance, you get a picture of early humans that's very different from the caricature of brutish cavemen. By day, they tracked animals, napped stone, dug roots, watched the weather. By night, they stepped into a different world. A world where the dead might listen, where the sky might speak, where animals had secret names and mountains remembered. They carried heavy spears and sharp tools, but they also carried invisible things, myths, songs, rules, taboos, dreams. And when the fire finally burned low and the last stories ended, when the ochre-stained hands were wiped clean on hides, when the drums went silent and people stretched out on beds of grass and skins, they fell asleep in a universe they had helped to create. A universe of meaning layered over the raw facts of cold, hunger, and danger. While they slept, the painted herds waited in the dark tunnels underground. The beads rested against sleeping skin. The Venus figurine lay beside someone's head or buried in a pouch with other small treasures. Above them, the stars turned slowly whether anyone watched or not. By morning, the practical work of survival would begin again. But that inner life, the songs, the symbols, the sense of hidden forces moving through everything, that never really stopped. It's still with us. Only now, instead of torchlight on limestone, we use screens in the dark. Instead of ochre on skin, we use digital avatars and fashion brands. Instead of carved ivory figurines, we have icons and logos and characters that mean far more to us than their physical substance. The tools have changed. The wiring underneath has not. So after all of this, what did early humans actually do all day? They worked. They walked miles to find roots and berries. They hauled meat back to camp. They shaped stone until their hands ached. They mended. They fed children. They watched the fire. They kept an eye out for teeth and claws glowing at the edge of the dark. But that wasn't all they did. They also sat. They stared into flames and did nothing at all. They watched clouds drift over hills and lines of migrating animals pass along the horizon. They told stories so slowly that a single tale might last several evenings. They played, not just the children, but the adults too. Mock fights, little contests, teasing games with pebbles and sticks and bones. They sang. They traced patterns on cave walls and on their own skin. They rested. Their lives were hard, but not in the way we often imagine. Not a non-stop scramble from dawn to dusk, but pulses of effort and long stretches of low, quiet time. A few hours of intense work, then a lot of simply being together, moving with the seasons, moving with the light. That balance is the part we tend to forget. Because here we are, with machines that do our grinding and lifting, with lights that turn night into day, with more information in our pockets than any hunter-gatherer could have imagined. And yet somehow, many of us end up with less true leisure than they had. Less unstructured time. Fewer evenings where we simply sit and watch the world without checking a clock. The irony is deep. We've built tools to free our time and then filled that time back up with noise. Your Paleolithic ancestors never scrolled. They never answered emails by firelight. When the sun went down, there were only a few options: talk, listen, make, dream, or sleep. Their attention belonged to the people around them, to the flames in front of them, to the stars overhead. But if you strip away the technology, the basic things that mattered then still matter now. Community. The circle of people who know your stories, who would share their last scrap of dried meat with you, who would stand beside you when the hyenas came too close. Today, that might be family, friends, an online community. The shape has changed, but the need hasn't. Our nervous systems are still calibrated for small groups around a shared task, a shared meal, a shared joke. Creativity. The first carved bone pendant, the first handprint on stone, the first rhythm tapped on a log. None of it helped catch more antelope, but it made life richer. It turned bare survival into a story worth telling. That impulse to make something unnecessary and beautiful is still one of the most human things we do. Nature. For almost all of our history, we woke and slept with the light. We learned the seasons by heart. We could read a landscape the way we now read text. Even if you live in a city, a part of your brain still quiets when you hear rain on a window, or wind in trees, or waves hitting shore. Those sounds are older than language, older than Homo sapiens. Purpose. Early humans didn't have 5-year plans, but they had reasons to get up. Feed the children, help the group, keep the fire alive one more night. Meaning was woven into daily tasks. Our meanings may be more abstract now, but underneath, the same question is always there. Who am I doing this for, and why? When we look back at their days, at the walking, the watching, the talking, the work broken up by laughter and silence, what we see is not a lost world we can never touch again. We see a template, a reminder that a good human day has a certain rhythm, effort and ease, noise and quiet, togetherness and a little solitude. The fire in your ancestors' camp has burned down to deep, steady coals. Most of the group is already asleep, curled under furs, breath slow and even. Someone adds one last piece of wood, more out of habit than necessity. Above them, above you, the same moon drifts across the sky. The same constellations look down, slightly shifted by time, but still recognizably themselves. 40,000 years ago, a child blinked up at those stars, fighting sleep for one more story. Someone reached over, smoothed their hair,
promised that the hunt could wait until morning. Tonight, you share that same human need to stop, to be safe, to let the mind loosen its grip on the day. The hunt can wait until morning. The world can wait until morning. For now, you can rest under the same ancient sky.